Very good. So it's very nice to meet you, even if we are through the Zoom. And I hope that in the future we'll be able to meet maybe in Israel, maybe in your university. And I'm thanking Jonathan very much for the invitation. I want to start with a statement, and in order for you to be able to understand my Israeli English, we call it Hebrew English. So I put some sentences, on the screen, and then we will continue with many slides. So what I want to start with is that, according to my understanding, the historiographical account of the history of Israel, now you can find it in the books of Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings, was intended for the generation for which it was composed, not for us. It was intended to convey the ideological message to the people of that generation, especially to the Jerusalemite elite who lived in Jerusalem at the same time when it was written. It was a text written by the same elite for the same Jerusalemite elite, based on the sources and the history that was known to all the people that lived in Jerusalem in the same time. The historians who composed this historiographical work didn't intend to describe the real history of Judah or the real history of Israel and Judah, but to explain the historical chain of events and to explain why Judah and Jerusalem are where they are at the same time when the history was written. It is historiographical text intended to explain the history rather than historical literature intended to describe the history. In this lecture, I would like to demonstrate the big gap between what we know from the biblical account and what we can reconstruct from other sources, mainly today from archaeology. I will focus on 3 different sites that I excavated, so I have the information about them, and we'll try to demonstrate that what we can reconstruct from the archaeology was well known to the ancient Judeans. They knew what we are discovering through archaeology, but it was not in the interest of the leadership and the scribes and the priests and the people in Jerusalem to describe these places or to describe the actual importance of these places. The problem is not with the biblical description. The problem is with the attempts of modern historians and biblical scholars to believe that what the Bible describes is the total truth and to reconstruct the biblical history based on these very ideological and polemic descriptions. So, why the 3 well-excavated sites? The Imperial Center at Ramat Rachel, the temple in Moza, and the border city and fortress in Azekah were not mentioned or merely described in the biblical description. And what archaeology can tell us about the reasons of biblical writers not to mention these sites. I will start with Ramat Rachel. Ramat Rachel is very close to Jerusalem. It was the center of the Judahite administration when Judah was under Assyrian, Babylonian, Persian rule. So we are talking about very long period of the late First Temple and early Second Temple period. And what I can tell you is that no one in these days can understand the history of Judah during this time without deeply understand and deeply know what is the place and function of Ramat Rachel. The site was never mentioned, however, in any biblical text. The Jerusalem official historiography totally ignoring this site, even if I'm sure, and you will see it, anyone in Jerusalem knew this place, could see this place, and probably even visited this place. So we're talking about an amazing palace, only 5 kilometers from Jerusalem, from the city of David, with a magnificent architecture. We're talking about proto-Aeolic capital, huge capital of 400 kilos each. We are talking about all kinds of stepped stone structure that was in the upper part of the buildings. We're talking about window balustrades, and this is maybe the symbol of Ramat Rachel, because we found many of these window balustrades in small parts, highly unbelievable high level of artists who did it. And we know that these window balustrades were existed because we have many models, mainly on ivory, of the woman looking through the window. So we know that they knew the windows, but the only place that we actually have the window is Ramat Rachel. So this is the window balustrade, and above it was a beam. And this is exactly the window balustrade that people are describing in these ivory symbols of the woman in the window. What else we have in Ramat Rachel, and this is the capital of the world, are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of jars, something like 45 liters in each one of them, for olive oil, for wine, and on many of the handles, we have stamp impressions. So we have stamp impression on many of these jars, and there is no other place in the world with so many stamped jar handles of so many jars. And the stamp impression are mainly from the time of King Hezekiah and Menashe, so late 8th and 7th century. And these are what we know as the Lamelech stamp impression, belonging to the king. This is the Hebrew Bible, the Hebrew that the Bible was written in this language, in this script. Lamed, Mem, Lamed, Chaf, Lamelech, belonging to the king, and place name below. And these are the stamp impression from the time of King Hezekiah and King Menashe. And then we have the rosette stamp impressions from the time of King Josiah and all the way to Zedekiah and to the destruction of the first temple by the Babylonians. And then we have many, many, many stamp impressions from the Persian period, from the time of Ezra and Nehemiah. In most of them, you have the name Yehud, the province of Yehud in Aramaic script. And what we have in this place is an amazing example of an administrative place that no one could understand what is the role of it. And this is the reason why I excavated this place together with many students from the University of Heidelberg in Germany and from Tel Aviv University. We excavated for 6 seasons. And when you'll join us in excavation, you'll see that every season we have a different color of the t-shirts. And with many, many students, you see that we excavate with 100 or 120 students, from all over, but mainly here is Heidelberg and Tel Aviv, and you see that this is the red season. So this is the red season of 2008, the picture. And what we have done, we excavated all over the site, all over this palace, in order to understand what was there. And the interpretation of the finds leading us to the understanding of the place of Ramat Rachel as the center of Judah, of the Judahite administration under the Assyrian, Babylonian, Persian, and even early Hellenistic rule, Ptolemaic, early Seleucid. So I'm talking about 600 years that this palace was existed in the Assyrian, in the Babylonian, and under Persian rule. And this was the place that the Judeans brought the taxes, brought the jars with wine and oil in order to pay the taxes to the empire. It was very wisely that the empire didn't put this building inside Jerusalem, the place of the temple, the place of the Judahite, cult and religion, but put it very close nearby, on the ridge nearby, and force the Judeans to bring the taxes to this place. And in this hill, they built the most amazing structure ever built in Judah. There was no other such fancy structure like the one that they built in Ramat Rachel. It was an amazing structure, and this is quite, a reasonable reconstruction of what we actually found: the size, the levels, the architectural items, and you see the Porto capitals in it. You see the stepped, stones that were on the roofs, and you see that all the hill was changed in order to put this structure on the top of a hill, and to put it exactly east-west in direction in a hill that is not east-west. And they cut huge part of the rock in order to build this amazing citadel above it. You see that they put it exactly east-west, and they change the rock and the direction of the hill. And what they built inside it is a very, very fancy structure. Never like this existed in Judah, big one, with a very nice garden around it. And this is something that I will tell you in a minute. Inside it, you can see how they put the stones on the roofs and the windows and the portfolio capitals, you know, here in the entrances. And inside it, there was a big yard in order to get the people coming and bring the taxes. And it was well closed, well fortified. And the main thing that we found here is an amazing garden that was built around it. What they have done, they just took out all the rock and put like a nice tennis court, but in the size of 8 tennis courts. And on it, they put half a meter of chocolate-like soil of the garden. And inside this garden, they put all kinds of water drains and pools and all kinds of, small tunnels and channels. The water could be here and there. All the area was full of water floating. And you were talking about a hill near Jerusalem. It's half desert. It's not where you are with snow and a lot of water. So the idea of getting the water was important. And all the hill was full of tunnels, channels, leading the water everywhere. And with a huge pools, that is only the corner of one of the pools that was there. And inside it, they put a lot of vegetation. And they created what we call a garden. Garden in Akkadian is a place guarded, you know, that it's guarded with kind of a fence around it. And inside it, you have a magical, you know, blooming vegetation. Even if you think about the first garden that you can find in the Bible, you know, in the book of Genesis, the Garden of Eden, you can think about the wonderful, trees and bushes inside it. It was well fenced, and there was one master of the garden who can decide who will be in and out. When the Greeks started to translate the Old Testament, and they translated the story on the Garden of Eden, they took the Persian word for garden, Pardes. Pardes is a Persian word with the same meaning of guarded place with a nice vegetation inside it. And this is why in the Greek, and now in every language, when you want to talk about the Garden of Eden, you're talking about paradise. And the only archaeological paradise that was excavated was the paradise, the garden in Ramat Rachel. And it's very similar in the structure to garden that we have in Babylon, in Assyria, in Persia. You can see here the palace, very similar to what we have in Ramat Rachel, with a large garden around it. You can see the same structure of the Proto-Holy capitals. You can see here the stones on the roofs. So these are all Assyrian, palaces. And you can see the same idea of the garden and the palace in Ramat Rachel with Assyrian, Babylonian, Persian garden. For example, this is the relief from the garden of Sargon II. And you see here the garden, you can see the palace, you can see the same images that you can find in Ramat Rachel. This is the palace of the palace of Ashurbanipal with the same garden. So the idea is to have an important, nice structure and a garden around it. And this is exactly what we found in Ramat Rachel. Now the question was, what vegetation was there? Because in the Assyrian, Babylonian, Persian garden, you have amazing vegetation. So we decided to check what we have, and what we found in the garden in Ramat Rachel is a pollen, the powder of the flowers of the vegetation that was blooming there during these periods. And what we found in the garden is all kinds of local, trees like vine and like myrtle, which is nice for garden, and poplar, which is it's a tree that needs a lot of water, usually on riverbeds, but also here it was, and willow, which is again not existing in Jerusalem, but usually in the riverbeds, it needs a lot of water, but it was in Ramat Rachel, and figs and water lilies in the pools. But the important thing was 2 trees. The walnut. Walnut is the first tree ever that came from Persia, and even the name of the walnut, Egoz in Hebrew, is a Persian name, Egoz. And this is the first tree, and it was very important in the, again, Assyrian, Babylonian, especially Persian, because of the shape of the fruit of the walnut itself. And not only this, but beside the cedar and other, we found the first tree of citron. The citron came from the Ganges through Persia and arrived in Ramat Rachel, and it was the first citron ever arrived in the Levant. And it's very important because very soon after, but it could be before, the citron became very important as one of the 4 kinds in the tabernacle, in the Sukkot event. So it couldn't be before they brought the citron, and we developed all kinds of ideas around it. But this is only symbolizing the importance of the palace and the garden and what we found in Ramat Rachel. And our conclusions are that it was a place that was built in order to show all the people around that this is the place of the empire. This is the place of the ruling empires over Judah. And this period of the Assyrian, Babylonian, and the Persian period, early Hellenistic period, this is the place where Ramat Rachel was blooming. Everywhere, could be seen this place. And in the minute that the Judeans got the independence, in the time of the Maccabees, in the time of the Hasmoneans, the place was destroyed. And this is the destruction of the Maccabees, of the Hellenistic, after the Hellenistic Revolution, and Ramat Rachel was totally deserted. So this is such an important place. And if you think why it was never mentioned in the Bible, we have the name, probably Beit HaKerem in the Bible, for a place name in the Persian period, but it was never mentioned because of the importance of the place, because it was a place that intended to put in shadow, the structure that were built in Jerusalem for the king, for the priest, the temple. And, again, it's interesting to think about the people living in Jerusalem could see the place of Ramat Rachel, but never mention it. This is, one example for what archaeology is giving us. And when we are coming back and thinking back about what we have, in reality, in the same time of the biblical time. And from here, I'm moving only 5-7 kilometers to the west or southwest of Jerusalem, where we found by accident, we found an Iron Age temple from the same time of the temple that probably was built in Jerusalem by David and Solomon. From the same time, we never knew that it's there. And only when the government of Israel wanted to build a new road to Jerusalem, this is now the new road that anyone who's coming to Jerusalem is going through on this bridge in order that people will not go through the dangerous road here. And when they put some of the pillars, for this bridge, suddenly they found a structure. And when I saw the structure, it was clear what it is. And I was so happy that they damaged only the side of the structure. You can see here the new road and how they found our temple. You can see here the old road and how dangerous it is. And the temple is just here under this pillow or near this pillow today. So now when we are coming to excavate it again, and we're coming this summer in the end of August and in September to excavate it again, we have a shade net of a big road that is above our head, so we can excavate without a problem. And you can see that it's only 7 kilometers from Jerusalem. And only 7 kilometers from Jerusalem, there was another temple that was built in the same time, in the same orientation, east-west, in the same size, and with the same plan of the temple that was built by, again, Solomon in Jerusalem in the same time. So this is an amazing thing that no one imagined that one can find such a temple so close to Jerusalem. And this place of Moza is well known because it's a nice valley, very close to Jerusalem, with a lot of water. And so it's important for the agriculture, is well known. It's even mentioned, it was mentioned as part of the cities of Benjamin, according to Joshua 18. And this is how we covered it when they built the road. And this is how we started to, put all the sand out that covered it when we came back in September 2018 to start excavating this place again. So this is the first delegation of the students that came from the University of Prague and Tel Aviv University. It's only a small preliminary excavation season. And you will see that we're going to excavate again this season. And what was found already then was a corner of a temple I'll show you in a minute the plan of it, that it was clear that it's the same size and the same plan as the temple in Jerusalem. But this temple was not only in the books, was not only in the description of the historians and the prophets, it's also a temple that existed. So we could find all the different functions and all the different items that were in this temple, all kinds of cultic vessels, and including, for example, the pit with all the bones, animal bones that were burned and thrown inside it. And we found hundreds and thousands of animal bones, all of them of kosher animals, all of them animals that were cut according to the biblical laws. So actually we could see and we could analyze what happened, what was here. And what we found here is a classical temple of this period with exactly east-west direction. The entrance is from the east, with two pillars, in front of the entrance. So I don't know if the name of these pillars was like in the temple, Yachin and Boaz, but maybe it was another name and maybe no name. And then in front of the entrance, there was a cult place, or kind of a small place to cut animals, and a pit for all the animal bones that were thrown inside it. So this is the temple that we are excavating, and it's exactly like the plan that is describing of the temple in Jerusalem, with two columns, with entrance, with a building going east-west with a long size. And this is also not surprising, because this is exactly the temples that we have in Lebanon, in northern Syria, in Israel. When we have a temple, this is how you have a temple. So if anyone wanted to build a temple in this period, this is how you build a temple. So it's not a unique thing. And also the temple in Jerusalem is not a unique thing. This is the temple that you have in the 10th, 9th century in all the region, everywhere around it. But again, the unique thing is that we could excavate this temple and to find what we actually had in this temple. So what we actually had. What we had here is a nice podium that was near the altar. This is the altar. This is the refuse pit with all the bones. And this is the podium. And on the podium, we had all the cult items that were used in the cult. And we had the altar itself, again, according to the biblical law, with unhewn stones and with steps going on it, and a lot of ash and signs of fire on the altar itself. And near it was this refuse pit with the bones and many, many cult items, like, for example, figurines. And what we had here, this is, for example, the one of the sets of the cult item that we have. And again, probably it was in the same time, in the same orientation, the same thing in the temple in Jerusalem. But of course, we cannot excavate and actually find it in Jerusalem in the 10th, 9th century BC. So what we have anthropomorphic figurines. And you see, these are male figurines with places to put hair, so bearded people. And you see here that we have the same figurines all over in all the temples and other places that we have in Philistia, like in Ashdod, and in the Shephelah, and in the Kingdom of Israel, and in Edom. And it's not so unique. And we have anthropomorphic figurines from the Iron 2A, from this 10th, 9th century, again, all over. So nothing is unique, but the unique thing is that we actually find the temple near Jerusalem with all these items. And we have a zoomorphic figurines, like the horse figurine. And again, it's not unique, because horse figurines we have all over in temples. So probably in Jerusalem we have a piece, in Samaria, and in all Megiddo, in all the other places. And we have cult stands, so probably for other cultic uses. So this is the cult figurine that we have in Moza, and we could reconstruct it according to the other some examples that we have and reconstruct it. But again, we have very similar cult figurines all over. So it was a kind of cultic vessel that was used in temple in this time. So we could learn what we have and put it back to place, like this. And again, we have cult figurines in Tanakh and in Megiddo and in Philistia. And when we see the importance of the lions, so again, lions were very important a part of nearly every temple in the Levant. And what we can see is that the stylistic, the iconographic, the plan of the temple is very common in the Aegean, in North Syria, in Phoenicia, in Philistia, in Judah, of course, and possibly also in Edom. So it's again, it's something that we know, but the important thing is that it's not only that we have a temple that was built in the same time when the Jerusalem temple was built, but this temple in Moza continued to function all during the first temple period, what we call the Iron II BC. So it's not only a temple that was built together with the temples of Solomon in Jerusalem, but it's a temple that existed all along the first temple period to the 9th, 8th, 7th century. Probably also it continued to exist in the 6th and the 5th century. So to the Babylonian Persian period, it continued. And we can excavate, this is what we're doing in the excavation, we can excavate different floors and to see the changes and the adaptations and how this temple was changed during the period that it existed, very close to Jerusalem. And again, to think, is it the same processes that went through the temple in Jerusalem, different changes and elevation of floors and building stairs and building some other things. So we could see what is going on in this temple during the ages that it served as a temple very close to Jerusalem, in Judah. And again, now we could try to put it in context and to compare to what we have in the Bible and to try to think how is it, because the way that we see it now is that it's not so unique. So probably every community that lived with 200, 300 families could have its own temple like we have in the region of Moza. The biblical account is against what we have in the archaeological finds, because according to the biblical account, there is only one temple and the one temple in Jerusalem. And we even have the description on the reform of Hezekiah, that he removed all the high places, and of course the reform of Josiah in the second book of Kings 23, that he, centered all the temples and left only one temple in Jerusalem. But if you see the Mesha inscription, so there was another temple in Nebo, in the other side of the Jordan. And when Mesha conquered this place, he took the vessels of Yahweh from the temple that was in Nebo. And when we see the relief of Sennacherib, when he conquered Lachish, so he's taking all kinds of cultic vessels from Lachish after conquering it. And you can see here the same cultic vessels that also we can find in the temples, including Moza. And if we're going to continue at Ajrud, a small site in the border of Sinai, so we can see another indication for a temple that was there. And we can see a temple in Arad, and we can see, an altar in Beersheba. And so there were other temples. But the temple that we actually can excavate very close to Jerusalem can give us the clearest indication about the relationship between the communities and about the understanding that a cult place dedicated to Yahweh could have existed in any area settled by Judahites, at least, again, until the late 7th, if really King Josiah did this reform as described. And the construction of the temple in Moza relates to the site's role as an economic and administrative local center for this community who lived in this area. But why not to think that every community, they needed a place of cult? And even if the temple in Jerusalem became stronger and more important, and maybe the central temple of the kingdom, there were other local temples like the one that we have in Moza. So this is how we started to excavate this place, and this is how we continued, and we can see the different changes. And we hope that in this coming season, that will start in August 12 and will continue to September 1, we will be able to continue excavating this temple just under this pillar, under the bridge. And you're all welcome to go to our website, telmoza.org, and to see and maybe even if you get your vaccines and things will be better, you can join us and actually touch a Yahvistic temple from the first temple period. And from this place, I can move for a few minutes to our site, Tel Azekah, that again, I'm going to spend in Tel Azekah 2 months this summer, from middle of June to the end of July, or when we'll go in middle of August to Moza. And this site is the first site that I'm excavating really far away from Jerusalem. And after excavating Ramat Rachel and in the city of David and Moza, during the time of Moza, I went to excavate Tel Azekah with, this is the biggest project of archaeology in Israel, with more than 100 students every season coming and digging with us. And you can see here, our group photo from 2012 and our group photo from 2013. I would like to put people, lying on the ground and take some photos of them from above. And in 2014, we had the war in Gaza, so we tried to send some peace, symbols around. And in 2015, we wrote Lamelech in biblical Hebrew, and put Azekah in connection with Judah. And in 2016, we had the Olympic Games, so we had some Olympic symbols. And in 2017, we had 2 jars of Azekah. So you can see the jars here with the name Azekah. And in 2018, we had this symbol of Lamelech sing again with Azekah in biblical Hebrew, as you see here. And last season, we had this arrowhead. It's, I should tell you that it's arrowhead. It's hard to see that it's arrowhead that we found here. But what we are doing is we are digging a huge site, a big tail. And the reason why I came here is the location. Because Azekah is exactly on the border between the hill country and the coast, between the mountain tribes and the coastal city-states, between what we have in the first temple period as the kingdom of Judah and the Philistines, especially the kingdom of Gad of the Philistines. And this is the border. And the importance of Azekah, and also the few times that it was mentioned in the Bible, it's because this is a border between these 2 places, the hill country, the coast, Judah and Philistia. So even if it's far away from Jerusalem, something like 40 kilometers, and much closer to Tzafi, this is the original border. This is because of geography. Azekah is lying on the northern side of a huge ridge, separating the coast with the hill country. And this is why you can see here the end of this ridge, and you can see how all the roads should take into account the place of this ridge. And this is why the most important junction is just below Azekah in the ridge, because no one can cross from west to east during, and cross this ridge. They have to go around it. So this is really an important place. This is a border place. And this is why also it was mentioned in the Bible. But again, pay attention. Even if Azekah was mentioned in the Bible, unlike Ramat Rachel and Moza, even 7 times, it was mentioned most of the times relating to the pre-monarchic period in Joshua. It was mentioned only once in Jeremiah in the very late Iron Age, and twice in the Persian period. And even if the biblical writer, they knew that the most important thing about Azekah is that it's a border. And this is why Azekah is so important in Samuel 17 when they are describing the war between David and Goliath. The war between the Philistines and the Judahites. And the war was between Socho and Azekah. So they knew the importance of the place. They totally ignored it during this biblical period. So this is the border. This is the original line between Judah and Philistia. And this is the reason why I'm not going to read it now, that we have a very important Assyrian inscription, Sennacherib letter to God, on his campaign to Judah, and he's describing that when he's coming from Philistia to conquer Judah and to make war against Hezekiah, of Judah, and against Hezekiah, you see here Hezekiah of Judah, he's describing Azekah as a stronghold, and he's describing it's like a nest of eagle, on the mountain ridge, with a pointed iron daggers without number, and its walls, and he's describing very, very nicely how he is conquering Azekah, and how he's burning Azekah and killing all the people of Azekah. And of course, for archaeologists, it's a very important place because archaeologists, they like, and archaeologists, they know how to find destructions. Archaeologists love destruction. And of course, the destruction of Sennacherib is so important in Azekah. And this season, we're going to actually expand the place that we actually find the destruction level from Sennacherib, but not only Sennacherib, but also Nebuchadnezzar. Because also in Jeremiah 34, the only place that you have Azekah in the first temple period, he's in Jerusalem, is describing how the king of Babylon's army fought against Jerusalem and against the cities that were left, Lachish and Azekah. And in a small ostrakon that was found in Lachish, ostrakon is a piece of pottery with ink that was written on it. The people in Lachish are saying, and let my lord, Zedekiah, the king of Jerusalem, that we are watching for the signals of Lachish, according to all indication which my lord is giving, for we cannot see Azekah. So Azekah was burned, Azekah was destroyed. So we have two destructions in Azekah, one in 701, one in 586. Two destructions that we can actually locate, and we excavate this destruction. We excavate the destruction of Judah or Azekah in Jerusalem in these two periods. And these are the four letters: Ayin, Zayin, Kuf, Hey, Azekah in Biblical Hebrew. Now, this is a huge site. I'm not going to details, and a lot of place to excavate. And we excavate the site since 2012, all over the places, locating here and there different periods. And we know exactly what we have. From the early Bronze III, I'm talking about 4,500 years ago, and onto the modern time. So we have many, many different levels that we are excavating with fortifications and with walls. You see here mud brick walls from something like 4,000 years ago. So these are still the mud bricks. And with a lot of cult items and a lot of clay figurines that are special for this and for the Azekah. So we can see actually, again, religion and cult of the people who lived here. These are clay figurines of a woman giving birth for, and had in the same time, twin suckling. So here you can see the twins, on her, this is another item. And here you can see actually the twins, and you can see how she's opening her vagina to give birth. No wonder why she's so sad. You see the face, she's very sad. I have no wonder why. But again, this is explaining why near Azekah you have the Elah Valley, the Valley of Elah, the Valley of the Goddess. And nearby you have a monastery for the twins and a cave, the Me'arat HaTeomim, the cave of the twins. So traditions coming from the local Canaanites onto the modern period about cult and religion. And what we have here is also destruction, which are so important for us. You see, because when you have destruction, you also have treasures. And, we can have the gold treasures, and we can find all the nice things that we have here. And again, when you have destructions, you have people that died in the destruction. I will just show you these people who are lying here in the destruction of Azekah. And you can see here that he's still holding here a horn in his hand. With all the items that he had around it. And we can actually reconstruct the destruction that we have, and you can see actually how it happened. Step by step, how a little girl tried to go out from her house, and how the house collapsed on her and buried her inside it. And you can see that we can reconstruct that she was wounded and what happened to her. So, but again, we'll not go to any details now, but this is the way that we are uncovering the history of the site, and we can get layer after layer out and understand what happened here. Then we can go back and reconstruct exactly each person, what happened to him, and how old he was, and if you had different problems before. But again, this is something that I will not come to any details now. But what we have here, again, all the vessels and all the items, and this is only pottery vessels from one house that we excavated, and we have so many houses and so many finds. But what I can tell you, and of course the destructions, is our conclusion. And the conclusion is that, about Azekah, is that Azekah was part of Judah for only 2 short periods, when Judah actually went to the border and controlled Azekah. About 100 years, between 871 until Sennacherib destroyed the place, and about 40 years in the time of King Josiah, and until the Babylonian destruction of 586. All in all, Azekah was part of Judah for 140 years, and then, the Persian period. There are many questions about it. How much Azekah was really part of Judah? Did the people in Azekah know the cult of Jerusalem, or they continue to have their own cult with the same figurine and the same cult item that they continue to have? How much a Jerusalemite saw Azekah as part of Judah? Or they thought about these Canaanites that we are ruling over there, but they are not really part of what we are. And I'm sure that the excavation in Azekah will give us a lot of answers also for this thing, for the reality behind Azekah. So I just want to finish here and show you how we are excavating with a short video about the excavation of Azekah, how it looks. So this is how we wake up in the morning. Going with the buses to the site. It's 7-8 minutes and back. Still dark. We always start to excavate when the sun is rising. So we are there still before. And then it's a little bit of climbing to the site with all our machines and tools and water and everything that we need. And I like to hear the sound of tools hitting the ground with the sunset, with sunrise. So this is the idea to have here. And then, of course, we start excavating with a beautiful sunrise over the Shfela of Judah. And then we start excavating. And we are excavating under shade in different areas. So each area with something like 15 to 20 people. And everything is manually. So we excavate slowly. And we are taking the soil and find, all the nice spots. And not everyone must work hard. Other many different ways to work. And the nice thing is that in every area you have people from all over the world: German, China, Israel, even Canadians coming usually. In every area, this area W, if you W, the west, and area E is the east. Chinese, German, Israelis, old people, young people, area E, area N, of course, in the north. One more area I'll show you, and then the people are working hard, but it's a lot of people are really enjoying it. And people who are coming once, always want to come back. So you see here, is. So this is the website of Azekah. You can see, and if you'll come, our friends in the Facebook, you'll get all the information of what we have. A lot of MA studies, papers, lectures, a lot of new information all the time. And I really hope that the Corona time will be behind us, and Jonathan can bring students and can come to actually become our partner in this wonderful project. So I'm exactly 45 minutes, and I'm thanking you very much.